Hey there, and welcome to this explainer in the Applied Solidity Development track, brought to you by Forge College. I am absolutely thrilled you're here with us today. We're going to be opening up the blueprints for one of the absolute most critical parts of smart contract security, granular access. We're going to unpack the access control pattern essentials, giving you the complete, rock-solid theoretical foundation you need before we get our hands dirty and start writing the actual implementation code. Okay, let's dive right into this architectural tour. We'll start by moving beyond the big red button. Then we'll cover keys, doors, and roles, the role lifecycle, managing the master keys, and finally lay out the blueprint for granular checks. Let's get to it. Section 1, Beyond the Big Red Button, Moving Past Global Gating. Now, in our previous lesson on environment isolation and safety, you got pretty comfortable with the Pausable pattern, right? You learned how to safely freeze a contract, preserve its invariants, and recover safely when something looks, a bit suspicious on-chain. But here's the thing. Pausing a contract is a really blunt instrument. Think about the Pausable pattern like a giant red panic button. Smack it, and it literally shuts down the entire factory, which is great if the factory is actually on fire. But what if you just need to fix a leaky pipe in the break room? You absolutely wouldn't halt all production just for that, right? AccessControl trades that sledgehammer for a scalpel. Instead of one broad, global toggle, it gives you individual, labeled doors and highly specific keys to manage your state transitions. All right, Section 2, Keys, Doors, and Roles. This is our architectural mental model. Because to truly master this pattern, before we write any code, we've got to understand how permissions actually work under the hood. In access control, we don't just rely on implicit trust or hard-coded addresses. No way. We use roles. These are named permission sets for specific actions. Think of a mentor or a pauser. But as we know, smart contracts don't read English labels. They read math. So a role is actually a role identifier. It's a compact, fixed-size bytes 32 hash of that label. And this is incredibly powerful because it completely decouples the privilege from the person. We are literally separating the identity from the actual permission. Let's ground this with a brilliant metaphor. Imagine your smart contract is a highly secure building. Your individual functions, like minting or transferring tokens, those are specific rooms inside that building. Roles, well, those are the labeled keys that unlock the doors to those rooms. And your core contract invariants are the safes locked inside the rooms. It's kind of like a giant puzzle, but it becomes pretty obvious when you look at it this way. You wouldn't give the night janitor the master key to the main bank vault, would you? Obviously not. You'd give them a key that only opens the cleaning supply closet. We need specific keys for specific rooms. Now, what's really interesting is how we translate that physical key metaphor directly into Solidity code. It looks exactly like this, a nested storage mapping. The outer key is the bytes 32 role identifier. That's our labeled key. Then, the inner mapping takes a user's address and returns a simple true or false boolean. The contract is basically just asking, hey, does this specific address hold this specific key? If it's true, boom, the door opens. If it's false, the transaction reverts. Moving right along to Section 3, the role lifecycle. Let's look at how we actually issue and return these keys over time. So the role lifecycle has 3 primary state changes. First up, grant. This is where an authorized admin assigns a role and our mapping flips to true. Second is revoke, where the admin steps in, takes the key back, and flips the mapping to false. And third, and I think this one is fascinating, renounce. This is where the holder voluntarily tosses their own key away, reducing their privilege without an admin even being involved. And listen to me on this one. It is absolutely crucial that you emit events at every single one of these steps. Without events, your auditors and off-chain monitors are completely flying blind. They need those events to reconstruct the privilege graph and see exactly who holds which keys at any given second. All right, Section 4, Managing the Master Keys. Time to talk governance and administration. So, this begs the question, who actually holds the master key? And, well, who is allowed to duplicate them? In the access control pattern, every single role has an associated admin role. This admin role acts as the master key. It dictates exactly who has the authority to grant or revoke the subordinate keys. This right here is what creates your governance boundaries. For instance, you might have a default admin role that manages the minter role, while a totally separate governance role manages the pauser role. There's a really great principle that perfectly sums up the tension in designing these systems. It goes like this. If every room is opened by one master key, theft compromises the entire structure. Isolated keys reduce blast radius but increase administrative overhead. Think about it. It would be an absolutely hilarious disaster to drop your single, centralized God mode master key in the parking lot. Someone picks it up, and bam, your entire protocol is drained. On the flip side, though, creating hundreds of hyper-isolated keys with complex hierarchies, yeah, that is a massive headache to administer on-chain. You've got to find the right balance for your specific architecture. And that brings us to Section 5, Blueprint for Granular Checks. Let's take all this theory and see how it builds out the implementation logic in your code. This brilliantly illustrates exactly where your implementation logic belongs. For basic membership, like just checking if someone is a mentor, you use that Boolean mapping inside a function modifier at the very top of your function. It keeps the code super clean and reusable. But for temporary or conditional grants, like say a key that expires in 24 hours, you actually don't use a modifier. Instead, you place that check inline using a require statement right next to the state mutation it protects. So the crucial point here is atomicity. If executing a privileged operation also consumes or removes a temporary right, you have to perform both of those actions in exactly one transaction. If you leave a gap, well, you open yourself up to TOCTO, time of check to time of use vulnerabilities. A malicious actor or a bot could easily exploit that race condition to reuse the key right before it officially gets revoked. So remember, your role changes and state transitions must be locked together in one single go. Ultimately, access control takes all those messy, implicit assumptions about who can do what and turns them into explicit, strictly auditable state. You trade the sledgehammer for the scalpel. But ask yourself this: what happens to your entire protocol if a rogue admin key is compromised and you haven't properly isolated your roles? Because a poorly designed access hierarchy is honestly just as dangerous as having no access control at all. Now that you have the blueprints, it's time to start writing the code. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. To continue your applied Solidity development journey and master this and other Web3 topics, head over and visit us at forge.college. I'll see you in the next one.